Welcome to the Animus Podcast. I'm here today with Bonray to create an emergency podcast regarding the recent PR.
Wee you, emergency.
Uh, so what we do want to start off with, and I love the way Bonray worded this, why Cheesekerd is even on PR?
No, you have to say it right. Say all the
Why the
words.
fuck is Cheesekerd even on PR? Like, we gotta. This was such a huge thing. Like, holy shit. Like, it
hmm
made. When Geo announced, right, that the whole thing. Not the whole thing, but there was gonna be a placement that was gonna be completely revised. Because, like, three people just changed their votes all of a sudden.
mm
Uh, and we all assumed it was gonna be G Meister. Because Geo was like, it's below the rankings that we really would allow to qualify to be PR. And
hmm
G Meister's like at what, 34 on the elo? So
yeah, at the end of the season, yes, he was at 34, I believe.
people were just like, oh yeah, it's gonna be G Meister. G Meister took it. And then when it got announced, they're like, who the fuck even is Cheesekerd? Like, it was not very, very chaotic.
Indeed, it was. I want to pause, and say, first of all, if you listen to the previous podcast, you would know that a lot of the things that I was talking about and Kellen was talking about on the previous podcast actually played out this past evening slash PR reveal. Um, I honestly understand why people were a little bit perplexed and confused, but I will give my little disclaimer. I mostly agree with the PR rankings, honestly. I don't think there needs to be a redo, but I'm going to walk you kind of through why I think that. I have some notes here, but I just want to say at the start, again, a lot of the people who are currently participating in the scene have not been playing Smash, for one, as a franchise for a long time, and then also specifically not even competing in this scene for a long time. So it's very easy to kind of like not recognize when, it's a good way to say this, not recognize where the things you assume how things work are not how they work in actuality. And we'll get into that in a little bit here. So, Kellen, did you have anything else to say before we jumped into it?
Uh, you got them all right. That we were right about how everything was gonna go out, and the way that everybody reacted, like we knew how it was gonna be, and that's just because nobody even knows how to even like what PR is, right? Like how it's even considered for. Like people think if you just win, you just get PR.
Yeah, so I'll probably just do a quick recap so we can jump into this because people probably don't super care about this part, but it is important. So one of the things that happens, one, is people place a lot of emotional importance on top aiding when top aiding actually is largely arbitrary for actually getting PR. The number eight being the top eight of a bracket does not necessarily inherently mean you are even getting good head to heads or meaningful matches for PR data. It just means you are placing in the top eight of a bracket. Usually, things like placing top four matter a lot more. However, what we went on to say was that it also depends on who you are beating. So, the people attending a tournament actually play a very large role in determining, for one, how your ELO goes up, and then two, when you qualify for PR consideration, those are the people who basically are generating your head-to-heads. It's the people you're playing against in bracket. So you need to be beating people who are meaningful to beat, and we'll talk about what a meaningful win is a bit later. On top of that, something I didn't emphasize very well, but I did talk about a little bit, is head-to-heads, right? So your head-to-heads do not really, um, your head-to-heads matter a lot, but your individual wins on PR players do not matter as much. Your individual wins usually are used to my understanding, get a tiebreaker. Basically, when you are playing against or when you're competing for a PR spot with someone who is similarly ranked and has a similar spread of wins, that random, let's say, Mutace win, if you are like statistically almost the same, would maybe push you over. But you just having a random win on a PR character, PR player, does not actually inherently get you PR consideration or mean that you are better. And I kind of vaguely talked about this when I talked about being consistent matters a lot. It's the combination of consistent good head-to-heads. And so I also want to make a little disclaimer, because I am wrapping up this part, that I am not a PR panelist at all. I just play this game and I observe things, and I participate in the scene. I also am not 100% sure about the methodology the PR players use, and are not PR players, the PR panel uses. And that's okay, because I think I have the general idea down enough to where I can basically explain how they made this decision. I actually think me not being a panelist and not 100% knowing their methodology actually will help a bit, because it basically means I'm not an insider and I can try to reconstruct their process, and not really be biased. Do you have anything to add, Kellen?
No, that actually pretty much hits the nail on the head for about everything we're going to talk about. Uh, as far as the panelists go, I know Geo's very hypercritical on data. So,
Mm-hmm.
and like bracket, we were just looking at the bracket information to gather up for this podcast. It gives you pretty accurate data for the season. So it's not like Geo isn't getting accurate information or information that we can't access either. So,
Yeah, and in
uh,
fact, something that might be useful for you is to open the bracket and look at people's rating and head-to-heads, and seeing if you would come to a similar conclusion based off of the data that is provided when you physically look up the head-to-heads we're talking about. And if your PR list looks the same after looking at those, well, congrats. That maybe means that's a good PR list, or maybe it looks radically different, and you can explain why yours ended up looking different. I think really it's important to have a data-driven PR rather than one based off of, oh, this person seems like they do good. You need to really be
yeah,
looking at those head-to-heads and stuff.
I do want to emphasize on something here before we get started that the reason why this was a big deal in the first place is, I think, three things. One we already talked about is the emotional investment that people have.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like if I already had like a salt tweet ready just to be upset if I didn't get PR and then like sleep, right? Because that's what I do. I either sleep or I grind, uh, just to like brush it off. But having this emotional investment, a lot of people handle and cope with it in very different ways, and that's why we're kind of here with one of the reasons. Two, a lot of people kept posting their fucking PR predictions like all the time without knowing anything. Like, I could probably find like multiple lists, and they're not even close to how it actually came out. And not only speaking of that, but all of them were just not even like correct. I was there twice, and I've seen like G Meister there twice on the list of like top 10. Uh, and then thirdly, just people just don't know. Like they don't care about how the process is. They care about how they feel and believe that their list or what their mental list of PR should be the one that presented.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that lets us move forward to, I guess, my first major point, as to why this PR probably was pretty tricky to put together. Is a lot of our PR from the past season have physically left.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't really play against them to get head-to-heads to make you look better for PR purposes. What I mean by that is our list dipped like halfway through the season. Stuart Person did not participate for the first, I believe, 2 months of the season, so you didn't have a chance to either win or lose against him. Wins was not available for a good chunk of the season and went through multiple mains. And then something you may have noticed if you were really, really paying attention to the PR document is that it looks like, and again, I can't say this 100%, Ryan, the Terry player, he was not considered a notable win anymore, because if you haven't noticed, like we talked about on um, our last
podcast.
podcast, he has not been going mains consistently in bracket, and he has also not really been trying. And so you can look at all of the notable wins for people in the head-to-heads, and they don't mention Raze at all. And I believe that's kind of why, is basically, in league terms, he was kind of smurfing a little bit. Like, he just deflated his ELO a lot. And so that kind of causes some issues for some people, because he actually was a lot of people's PR wins. So when you think of it, with those 4 people removed, you have basically this network of people who, all basically kind of go to either Otaku or Atonement, and they don't necessarily always bump into each other, so they don't have the head-to-heads. Because again, a lot of people are missing, and then like with the other half of people, it's like if you go to Atonement, you're going to run into this set of 3 people, and if you go to Otaku, you're going to run into this other set of 3 people to get PR wins. And that kind of matters a lot, as you will see going forward. So next, like we were saying, why the fuck is Cheesekerd even on PR? Like, what was happening with that? And this is probably what you've been waiting for. We've been kind of yapping a bit, but we had to set the groundwork. So Cheesekerd, when they were doing the PR, his ELO was 23. If you don't know, the normal range for consideration for PR is the top 20 ranks. So that puts him outside of the cutoff range. A lot of people were upset about that. But it's important to kind of remember what the purpose of PR really is. It's to create kind of like a data-driven or backed ranking of players, right? And for a lot of the people, as you can see, if you pull up the bracket, who are in the top 20, they do not enter locals enough to actually be considered for PR, because they don't make the attendance requirement. So like we can look at people like Haru, who is undoubtedly like very good. He would probably be top 3 or so if he entered things regularly. And you can look at like Rally, who also probably would be in a similar position. Or you can even look at Mute, who actually did not make the PR this season, right? Because Mute did not enter enough things. So that automatically sucks out people like that. On top of that, because a lot of our PR has been super duper MIA, what that means is that actually the people in the bottom half of top 20 are basically competing with people between ranks 10 and almost 30 for those last few PR spots, instead of just competing with the top 20 people. Because when you think of it, you have 20 people in the top 20, right? And you just take out like, I don't know, like let's say 7 of them, because that's actually like a very reasonable thing to say. Because I actually think it's more than that. A lot of the people in the top 20 don't even have enough matches to be considered for PR. So that basically means they didn't really have anything to work with. And so what I suspect happened, again, this is not law or anything, is that basically they were going down this list for top 20, and they were like, these people don't have fucking matches, bro. And so they extended it to person number 20, or pardon me, 21, 22, and then they stopped at 23, because that was the group of people who had enough data. And if you look at 21 and 22, OP/XP and Gallon, XP has not been entering tournaments this entire season. He just started entering again. He probably has less than, honestly, 5 tournaments entered this season. Let's see. He has 1, 2, 3, 4. He has exactly 5 tournaments. And then we have Gallon, who has been at school until very recently, and he probably does have pretty good tournament entry, but it's still not like he basically was only here for the last like leg of the season, because he just came back from college. So when you think of it, we have Cheesekerd, who's like 1 below Gallon and 2 below XP. who actually does have enough participation to be considered for PR. When you consider that we have a lot of people who basically I would consider them empty rankings where their ranking functionally does not matter because there are not enough tournaments entered for them. And so it makes kind of a lot of sense that he would even be able to be considered for PR because he was basically going down the list. He was the only person who really had enough data, besides maybe Gallon. Gallon also had a good bit of data, but his matchup spread was a bit wonky, so we'll talk about that later. Cheesekerd was the person with the most data who had the best wins, basically. That is the short answer. And so, again, I have a little project for you. Make sure you open the bracket and really look at all those top 20 people. And then in your head, within the past 5 weeks or so, have you seen any of these people enter a bracket in person? And just either mentally or physically draw a line through them. And then after you do that, tell me how many people in top 20 are actually left, and then you can kind of understand why they would need to expand it, right? So with that being said, we'll move on to the next point. Kellen, did you have any commentary?
Yeah, so you brought up like people not there's not enough data basically, right? That's basically the answer here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if we look at because you were talking about Rays, how he kind of started throwing, uh, and I am glad they didn't add Rays as well. Not that I'm glad, right? Because that would have made me look better, but I understand why they didn't make him as like a positive or a good win in general, just because he doesn't really care, and the only time he cares is when he's upset. Uh, which is not very often now because now he's just trolling and having fun at the tournament. Uh,
He's free.
but
Like spiritually free, not like free like easy. Like he
oh
just
no, yeah, he is.
he
He's.
not a care in the world.
I saw him smile recently after he went 0-2.
That never happens. That's so weird.
But the point is basically like there was just no data. Like I beat Arliss once and then I never saw him again.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
or like I got 2 wins on wins and Emo Lord, but out of like the out of all the tournaments that we've all gone to, like it is very lucky that we both met high up in bracket and that there wasn't like an upset prior. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
the only real way that there was going to be good data is if you were going to tournaments that you're basically you had to go to Otaku. You had to go to Otaku to fight Patu, Renegade, Toast, and occasionally Giddy and Skinny when they went, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and getting wins on them is very difficult. If you can get wins on them, then you're probably gonna get on PR anyways. But getting data
Yeah.
off of the lower 10 to 20 people is extremely difficult as of this season.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I'm gonna segue into what I was gonna talk about. Is the next point is how do you even get to BPR? Like again, I think a lot of people don't really understand this process. So I guess to just make it as simple as I understand it, again, I am not a PR panelist, so take this with a bit of salt or a grain of salt, a grain of salt. You have the basic ELO qualification. You have the head-to-heads. But more importantly for the head-to-heads is the actual win rate, not just having individual wins on people. And then the number of tournaments you've actually entered to provide data for that. These things are all pretty interrelated. If you are entering things regularly enough to have a good win rate on a notable player, your ELO is probably pretty high, but that's not 100% guaranteed, right? But, intuitively, you should probably have all three if you are doing things this way. However, again, like I mentioned, people not physically being available causes a lot of chaos. And like Kellen was mentioning, which tournament you enter actually matters a lot. So, what I have observed is that actually we are very segmented between basically two halves of, I don't even want to say players, but people either have time to go to Otaku or they have time to go to Atonement. They do go to the other tournaments, and that's good. Um, but as I've mentioned before, it matters who goes to the tournament. And so Otaku and Atonement go back and forth between being really stacked. And that is kind of what matters because you have a lot of access to PR players in both of them. For Atonement, if you are, let's say, like towards the bottom of top 20 or a little bit lower, that is a good tournament for you to enter because you have direct access in a small bracket to usually the lower ranked PR members because Skinny doesn't normally go to Atonement right now, and neither does Giddy, and neither does Toast. So you're really working with kind of like positions 5 through 10 here, right? So that is useful for those players. However, again, at Otaku, generally you see the higher end of PR also going to those. Now, if you are in a position like whatchamacallit, kind of like, actually, I'll even specifically mention you. Like, if you're in a position like Animus, where he has entered Otakus, but he has way more atonements, even though he's doing good at these atonements, he's physically not having the head-to-heads with like Giddy and Toast to shoot his rank up. Like he would need to be beating them at whatever local they go to. Now, this doesn't mean you need to specifically go to Otaku just to get a higher rank, but what it means is you need to like really think about how people are performing throughout the season, and sometimes that means you need to go to a tournament you know they're going to beat them.
Yeah,
You just have to do it.
like
That's how you get the head-to-head
the
data.
only way you were gonna fight Patu outside of Otaku, right? Because if you go to Otaku and you want to fight Patu, you're gonna have to beat your first two winners matches, which you're
Hmm.
most likely not seeded to win.
Yeah.
So then you would have to go to something like Tuesday Takedown, where I see Patu there a lot. But
Hmm.
then you have to beat Patu for it to actually matter.
Yeah, exactly. Um, And so again, these other tournaments do matter, but it's just kind of like they don't end up being stacked the way Otaku and Atonement do. And when I say stacked, it's just they have a high percentage of PR players for their size. Like again, Atonement often has only like a 20-person bracket, but like 4 or 5 of them sometimes will be PR or HM. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
again, like you're more likely to actually get matches in with those people to get your head-to-head data, but when you run into them, you have to make sure you win.
Yeah,
Um, and with Otaku, even though the wins matter more because it's higher PR, to even get your foot in the door to play against those people is very hard because you have to go through like a 60-person bracket to do it.
so something I want to bring up. Not only so like we talked about going to Otaku to fight someone like Patu. I'm gonna use her as an example.
Hmm.
You have to win your first two sets, but if you want easier access to her, you could go to Tuesday to Takedown.
Hmm.
But you gotta understand that going to more tournaments. Not to say that you should dodge tournaments, but there are other people who are also trying to do this, who are on your skill level, that you are also going to have to compete. So if you don't beat Patu and you go to losers, you're now also fighting for people who are also looking for that Patu win, who are also grinding, who are also fighting for your spot. So it's very volatile. Like it's very, it's not that it's not fun, but it's very difficult if you're really trying to go through that plan, and that's why this PR has also been pretty wonky with data.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna mention when I actually actively well, like right before I quit, actually, when I used to actively compete, I was gonna start going to tandem specifically just to play against Renegade so that I could like work on that matchup and then eventually get wins on him. Because I knew that like if I needed to be or if I wanted to be PR, like I just kind of had to like have matches against him where I beat him and find a way to get that in. And I wouldn't be able to get that at the tournaments that were available to me normally.
Yeah, uh, and that's a good point. Like it's. Let me think of another example that this would because they also have to make it to these tournaments, and then you also have to drive to these tournaments. Because most people are on the northwest side, but if you go
Mm-hmm.
to Tandem, you have to go downtown. If you go to Tuesday Takedown, you have to go all the way south to Musa. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
LFG is also near downtown too, so we're you really gotta really want you really want that data. You really gotta want it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so we went over, I guess, the two main things I mentioned. Again, we don't have a lot of PR players physically available. And the ones that we do have available go to specific tournaments. Atonement specifically, obviously, I'm talking about it because it's my tournament, but Atonement specifically tends to have the lower half of PR more. But the bracket is smaller, so you're more likely to actually get a win on these people there. Because you're not going to get like cucked because you ended up playing against like a random min you've never heard of before or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
like with Otaku, that bracket is big as hell. You might end up playing against like 3 Game and Watches and a hero and get thwacked 3 times in a row before you get to fight like a PR person. Um, so it just you kind of have to think about these things a little bit tactically if you're really, really trying to min-max getting in. Um, but uh yeah, to me it's pretty cut and dry. Like I understand why they made the decision they did. If you want to get to the more technical part, at this section here, I'm basically gonna kind of go over like why certain people probably didn't get it compared to Cheesekerd. Because let's go in a hypothetical situation where they were like, okay, we are just going to replace the number of people who are technically inactive or the empty PR spots with people who don't make the attendance. We are going to replace those people with an equal number of people below 20, if that makes sense. So if we removed 7 people for inactivity, we're going to, pardon me, we're going to expand the PR consideration to rank 27 to compensate, right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that theoretical situation, I just grabbed a few people. And some of these people actually ended up being HM and stuff. Just to kind of show you what I am talking about. There's really no nice way to do this because I have to mention names. So we're gonna go ahead and play with actually we'll do KH first. That'll be fun. So KH made HM, right? And he is a perfect example of what we are talking about. Specifically with he enters primarily atonement, which gives him opportunities to play against a lot of the lower ranked players, um, the lower ranked top players. There we go. That's a good way of putting it. And he has wins on some people. However, KH has only entered, I believe, 9 tournaments overall this season. And his lack of data probably is actually why he did not get like spot number 9 or 10, honestly. So when you look at his data, and I'm going to reference characters or not characters, players that they talked about on the PR draft document. So you might want to get that open as well. I probably should have said that earlier. So something really important to note is they considered Lorian a notable win, which isn't bad. That's good for Lorian. But what that means, though, is that kind of is an example of how competitive this like HM and 10th slot was. Because Lorian obviously is not currently PR, and his overall ELO at the end of the season was 18. And what that tells me is if he was considered a notable win, probably slots like 14 to 24 were all almost basically interchangeable as far as like their wins and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll talk about that a bit more. Back to KH. KH is positive on Lorian. That was considered something that was good for him. However, when you actually pull up his positive record on the document, you'll see they actually say he doesn't have a positive record. Why is that? The reason is because even though he's positive in air quotes on Lorian, that's off of 1 win. That's not enough data to determine directly if Lorian actually is better or worse than KH, at least in terms of win rate. That's only one game. That could easily have been a coin flip, right? Likewise, he is negative in air quotes on Big Mike, but that's because he has one loss to Big Mike. You can't definitively tell anything. And as you know, Big Mike and Lorian were both considered notable people if you look at the sheet. Likewise, he is positive with one win on Hayes, who is also considered a notable win. But again, not enough matches played, right? And then finally, even though they didn't consider him important, I'm just going to use him as an example. He is also positive with one win on Rays. However, that doesn't really matter because, again, that's not enough data to definitively make that decision. Remember, the purpose of PR is to make a data-driven decision on people's relative skill level. He doesn't have enough data that can't be possibly attributed to random chance to I'm sorry, to make that decision. So what it looks like, what they actually looked like for having actual weight for determining him being HM is the fact that he had an even win rate on, or he had an even win rate with Patu, right? And that is actually kind of honestly kind of crazy because he's not being considered for HM because he has a positive record on any notable players, because he actually doesn't, according to how they do this. Like, having one win on random people does not, it's just not enough data. So like they basically ignored all his wins because he only has a win on them once. He like will go to a tournament, and then if he beats who's there, he very likely doesn't see them ever again to like emphasize he's actually better than them. So he just has to go to more shit, basically.
Yeah, there's not enough because we talked about doesn't matter if you've won. Like what's a good example here? So I've beaten Giddy once, and then let's compare that to Emo Lord, right? I think I've beaten Emo Lord like twice or three times. When you fight someone for multiple times in a set, right? That is going to occur more data. There's more adaptation if you want to really think about it as like a player. But in terms of data, like you need this to happen multiple times for there to be a conclusion like, okay, out of 5 sets, this person is clearly the better player.
Yeah, exactly. So specifically with Cage, again, I know I'm being redundant, but I'm trying to really emphasize this so y'all understand. What they actually looked like was his win rate on Patu, because all of those positive, in air quotes, wins he had, they did not even matter. They didn't matter because he did not have enough games against the same person. So he only has that 50-50 with Patu to matter. Now, if you look at, let's say, okay, we're going to use G-Meister as an example because he was brought up a lot. So if you pull up G-Meister, right, and he actually even gave his own wins, but if you remember from listening to the podcast earlier, if you look at the information he provided, he went 1-2 on Toast, 2-4 on wins, and then he was positive on Roos and Cheesekerd. So if you are a PR panelist, the Toast one does not matter for the reasons I said earlier. Basically, all that Toast win matters for, and the Mutace win, obviously, is if he was tied for like 10th place or something, and those people didn't have a Mutant Toast win, but they were otherwise about the same, that would edge him into maybe taking that slot over someone else. But on their own, having a negative win rate against someone does not matter. It just doesn't matter. That's I want to emphasize that that's not how most competitive games work. Like you just like, it's like you need to either be winning or nothing, basically. Like just having like even being close with someone who's like pretty good, like usually does not matter. You just have to beat them. So, you know, the Toast and wins don't really matter that much. They would be useful again if he had someone who is pretty similar to them. Otherwise, now he does have wins on Roos and Cheesekerd, and those are pretty solid. But those people are like at the bottom level of the top 20. And he does not have other notable wins besides that. So I'm going to talk about kind of like these notable wins he doesn't have that are basically the same ones I did with KH to kind of explain again why he would not be considered in this case. So he is negative on Lorian. Like he has enough games to say he's definitively negative on him.
Mm-hmm.
He is negative on Rays, who again I mentioned they probably didn't use him for PR consideration, but I'm just gonna bring him up because I brought it up with KH. He did start beating Rays towards the end of the season, but for the majority of the season, Rays has been positive on G Meister. Now he's also negative on Hayes, who in my opinion, honestly, when you look at this document, Hayes actually is the actual gatekeeper. I know people meme about that stuff, but like basically your win rate against Hayes basically decided if you got ninth and 10th, basically. And I'll talk about that more in a bit, but he's negative on Hayes, who was slot number 8, right? He was
Yeah.
slot number 8.
8.
And then he's negative on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you got position number 10. So he doesn't. Oh, and then he is even on Big Mike. That is his technically best win rate on this list of people. And so as you can see, if you compare that to like KH's best even win rate was against someone who is definitively PR, but G Meister's best even win rate was against someone who is tenuously PR.
Yeah,
You
like
understand like the difference between that?
yeah, because Big Mike, he probably could have contended for PR, but
Mm.
again, no data and like it's just. But two is always going to be on PR. It's just a matter of are you going to be number 1 through 5.
Yeah, exactly. Like there was no doubt at a certain point that Patu was going to be PR. And so those wins, even if it was just an even win rate, mattered for the purposes of this PR panel.
Mm-hmm.
But G Meister also had similar stats, but the person he went even with was
Yeah,
not as highly ranked. That's just how it works. He has to be beating people who are or at the very least going even with people who are ranked higher than that,
so not
than
only
Big Mike.
that, since G Meister was like the main topic of yesterday, right? That was the
Mm.
main reason. Uh, Not only Cheesekerd being 7th, but it's just that idea that if Cheesekerd was allowed, why wasn't G Meister? If you look at G Meister's record against like KH, it's also negative. And if you
Yeah,
look at
exactly.
it for the recent events he's went to, he went 0-2 a couple of times, and he's lost to people like I think he's lost to Hart twice, which I think he was like trying to practice in a Cineroar or something. I remember Hart telling me about it, but that still affects you, right? Like even if you have a 5-2 win rate on Hart, those two losses still matter because it shows that you're beatable in that situation, or at least the data does.
Yeah, well, that I will say that that probably doesn't really matter that much outside of like PR eligibility. Like you can have like
Yeah, you can
random
have.
you can have random O2 sessions because like for instance when Rays made PR like last season for the first like month of that season when he was playing like Kazuya, he was going like O2 regularly and then he
Mhm.
still just like won a lot to make up for it later.
Yeah,
Um, like what that would matter for, at least in my opinion, like him losing to people, I guess, ranked lower in air quotes, is that is more about like PR consideration. Like that still doesn't take away the head-to-heads if he has good ones.
hmm
But the issue is again, he did not have strong enough head-to-heads to matter. And again, I want to really emphasize that having random PR wins does not matter. It doesn't, well, it does
yeah.
matter, but it does not matter in the way people think it matters. You have to have a positive win rate on that head-to-head, or at least be going 50-50 with someone who is rated like high.
So for the same reason that people like Haru and Rally aren't PR is the same reason why you can't just have a 1 win against Mutes or a 1 win against Kitty. or against Batu, because you need that data. You need to show, like Bonner has said, this is a data driven PR list. The data needs to say that there was enough to determine this. So there was enough data to determine that you are better than Mudes. So then that win rate actually matters.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and I want to emphasize
Um,
that too, because I don't think people really realize that. Because whenever, and we talked about this in the previous podcast, but whenever somebody like Skinny loses, people do not shut the fuck up. like, and they make it like that will solidify your PR spot for pretty much the whole season,
mhm,
in my observation.
mhm. That's true, and again, it just don't matter, bro. It doesn't matter. You gotta do it again, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and that is, and if you remember, I've talked to people about this in person, multiple people. It would probably sound like I was just being bitchy, saying like, I mean, that's cool you did it, but it doesn't matter. Or you might have even said like, I've like been playing with someone and did well against them who's like ranked high, and like I'll get a compliment and I'll be like, it just doesn't matter. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, it literally does not matter.
Yeah, because
Like, it literally doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
so I don't know if you brought up G Meister's out of city wins, because G Meister, uh, it was a joke PDF file from what he told me, but he did legitimately bring up like he has out of city results where it's like 3-0, 2-0 against multiple out of city players, but like
Hmm.
these are also like number 10, number 8 in their like Cisco. Like, let me look up Cisco. I'm pretty sure I just looked at this.
Well,
Uh,
I'll also put a quick pause on that. Out of city does not actually like
yeah,
determine your local PR. It is used for tiebreakers.
exactly. Like
So like it doesn't.
that would
y-
matter for like Toast and Renegade, not
Yeah.
not for number 10, not for me and Hayes, unless it was like super close that Hayes and I were even and we both need. But that's very rare. Like, it literally doesn't fucking matter at all.
Hmm. So while you do that, I guess I can look at Cheesekerd's data. And this will also kind of solidify like why he was the person who was chosen. So when you look at Cheesekerd, he is considered positive on Lorian, which is true. He is positive on Lorian. He is positive on Big Mike. He is positive on Hayes, and he is positive on Rays. Now, if you look at the two people below him, Wins and um excuse me, I'm sorry. Wins and Kellen, or Animus, pardon me. You can see that they also have a pretty good positive spread, but their positive spread is on Emo Lord, who does not play that much anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and Lorian for Kellen. So he doesn't have like Kellen specifically does not have enough positive win rates. He just has a few, while Kate, or not Cage, Cheesekerd has like four, or really three, because again they didn't consider Rays. And then wins is a little contentious. I kind of think wins reasonably could have taken the seventh or eighth slot instead of ninth. Um, but he has wins on our list, Hayes and Roost, who was also considered meaningful for the purposes of this. So um, he has wins, but again, when you look at like Cheesekerd's info, he has like just kind of like a better even spread, or not a better even spread. He has like a better like positive spread. Now I do see on actually when I look at Cheesekerd, his record on the PR document, they are saying he went even with Big Mike, Lorian, and Roos. And that's fair. They can consider that. I do think when I said he was positive on them, it was very slightly positive. So I think they considered that to be functionally even.
Yeah, I think they might be
Uh,
looking at percentages rather than like being 4-3 doesn't mean that you're
yeah,
positive. It's more like 56%, so that's even.
yeah, exactly. But regardless, he still has like a good spread of even matchups if you look at things like that. So again, I wouldn't maybe have him as seventh. I might have had him as like eighth and pushed up Wins and Hayes, but this is basically like literally what I was talking about earlier, right? He has an even or positive record on just simply more people. Um,
Yeah, because
and
he
that
entered
that
a
that's what
lot.
yeah, that's what happens. You gotta enter and then you have to beat the right people.
Correct. I mean, like that's just it. You just have to win. Like that's what uh, people like Tiramisu, Austin, Bonray, and I will just tell you. Like just win, and that's just because you have to. Like you have to win to actually get this data,
Yeah.
and for it to actually matter.
Hmm.
And like I said, this is being made. This podcast is being made because there was a whole like outburst of all of it. Uh, Everybody on this PR list should be on the PR list. Most people, or like people that kind of understand that these people qualify for PR, just want to order differently. Outside of a couple people that want like KH there or like G Meister there.
Hmm. Do we have anything else we want to talk about, or are we done?
Uh, Final thoughts. Let's see. I really do think that, not to discredit anybody or myself, but like this season was really, really wonky. Like literally, the first thing we talked about was the PR physically left this area, and that made it really hard to get data. Like if I could fight Arliss more, I'd probably get more wins. Or if I could, or if Raze counted, I would be doing so much better. But like that's just how it is, honestly, and that's probably what's gonna happen again. Cause I think, does Hayes go to school?
I believe
I
so.
don't
I
know where he
think.
was, but I think, yeah, I think so because he was gone before like summer, and then like Wentz is going to school, Skinny is going to Dallas. Who else is leaving? Like we're getting a lot of people actually leaving on our PR. Not a lot, but a good amount. And the people that were contending might also be leaving. So this might happen again, which which is something that we want to bring up, that if you really want PR, you're going to need to enter a lot of more different things. Like you can't just enter otaku and uh, atonement, which I mean you can, and you can still get like 10, 9, or 8. But if you really, really want to get up there, you're gonna need like at least an even win rate on Patu, Giddy, or Toast. You can't just have 1 or 2 wins while they have like 6 wins on you.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like you can get away with like if you really want to be PR, I'm gonna contradict Kellen a little bit. You can get away with only going to those two tournaments. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to go to more though. It's important you go to stuff. Go to stuff. Go to Tuesday takedowns and Ascension. But the thing is like I mentioned at the end of last podcast, you need to be figuring out how to beat specific people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do it. If you really right now, listen to me. You can't see it, but I'm grabbing you by the collar of your shirt and I'm shaking you a little bit. Um, if you want to be PR right now, you need to be figuring out how to beat Animus and Haze. You just have
Correct.
to do it.
Correct.
If you cannot at least beat those two and you can't do it consistently, you probably are not going to get PR. And you know what? You can get away with just going to Atonement until you learn those matchups or wherever they go. Like, let's say they both go to Ascension because they're bored or something. If you go there and beat them like 2, 3 times in a row, get that 100% win rate, and then don't enter enter what they enter anymore, you're good.
No,
You can
yeah.
you can stop doing that, and then you can just fish for Otaku and just try to fish for other PR wins, and then if you get them, you're good. If you don't, you're still fine because you have that positive win rate.
I don't know if you know this, but like early Ultimate seasons, like season 1 through 3, like there was a
Mm.
rule where you had to enter more shit because people were doing that, like literally.
Yeah,
uh, and like Bonray said, you have to be consistent about this shit. And you don't only have to, and this is more about advice rather than like the actual PR, but like if you do want to get PR and you want to get better, like Hayes is okay with playing friendlies. I'm okay with playing friendlies. Like Cheesekerd is okay with playing friendlies. Like they're like literally the reason why Hayes and Cheesekerd are above me IMO is because they grind really hard. They do not give a fuck who they're playing with in friendlies. They will play the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important that you don't have to only go to our brackets that just to play with us. You could, I mean, like you do to play friendlies, but like you don't only have to do it in a bracket, and you don't have to worry about seriouslys or whatever the fuck people call it nowadays. Like literally, like you don't even have to ask us to take it seriously. If we're going our secondaries and beating your ass, then you need to figure us out. Like it's not just the character. This is something Tiramisu and I have talked about. Is that you need to figure out the player too. Like it's not just about Sheik or me brawler because we both play in a certain way, and there's a reason we lose to certain people that aren't even on top 10.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then. Anything else?
Um, just make sure that we don't get too upset. It's okay to be emotionally invested into these kinds of things, but I think we need to make it healthy and make sure to not overvalue. Well, I'm biased because I made number 10, but you know what I mean. Like, it is better to not put too much emotional investment to where you're gonna get super duper sad for weeks because you didn't make PR or because you didn't do good at a tournament.
Yeah, it's important to have composure. The second you start getting triggered before you even enter a bracket, the harder you make it for yourself.
Exactly. Well, anything else for you, Bunner? Any advice, life tips?
Yeah, you gotta learn how to beat the people around you. You gotta learn how to, in the very least, if you have PR ambitions and you're not like PR right now, I think you need to start learning how to farm the bottom five of yellow. And that's just how it works. And Lorian, you probably need to learn to beat Lorian. He was also the second
Yeah, like
gatekeeper. It was Hayes was like gatekeeper for a lot of PR, and then Lorian was the other gatekeeper
Lorraine, G
because
Meister,
he.
Ruse. We're gonna wrap this
Mm,
up because my girlfriend's locked out of the house.
okay.
So thank you very much for listening to the end of this podcast. Thank you very much, Bonray, for coming in, spitting the facts about what the fuck and why the fuck Cheesekerd was PR. Y'all have a good day.
All right. Bye bye.